All right, let's now focus on workplace culture. Allegations have surfaced at NAB. Senior managers have been seeking to influence scores and feedback provided by staff in engagement surveys. The legitimacy of these processes has now come into question, given these kind of surveys are used extensively in a range of organisations. How relevant are they? Well, let's try and find out from Joydeep Hoare. He joins us from People and Culture Strategies. Joydeep, good to catch up with you again. I would imagine that anyone who's been in a reasonably large business or corporation would have been involved in some sort of engagement survey. So what is their relevancy? What are they intended to do?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Andrew. Engagement surveys have been around for a little while. And I think the genesis of engagement surveys was to try to give employees, and particularly in large organisations where you might have more concentrated management who are removed perhaps from the coalface of speaking on a regular basis to a larger workforce, giving those employees the opportunity to be heard, usually in the form of an anonymous survey, and for the organisation to, through that anonymity, get feedback in relation to the quality of management, the quality of the organisation's culture, whether the organisation is really living its values and what it says it stands for. And I think it was certainly something that was very well intentioned when it started. What has happened in more recent years is that organisations, particularly organisations where they've been less than satisfied with the results of engagement surveys, have said, we now need to make this a more meaningful exercise, and we need to actually have a almost punitive element to for managers if their engagement surveys in their particular area are not what they need to be.
So is this at the same time a vote of confidence in management from employees?
Well, it can be, but I think it more speaks in the negative. The organisations would probably expect, if they're speaking honestly, that we do want and would fully expect that managers are respected by their team members, that they are inspirational and doing all the right things. The reality is that as time goes on, employees become more exacting in terms of what they expect from their leaders, and I think that's understandable. And managers become more time poor and more challenged, and the external environment, we all know how hard it is to attract and retain people. So it's not surprising that as time will go on, and I think this year organisations that are doing engagement surveys will find their scores are likely to plummet as against previous years.
Yeah, that's interesting in itself. So I guess the question for many is, does management actually act on the feedback it gets, or is it just seen to be doing the right thing by asking its employees how they're feeling at the moment?
Well, I think organisations need to find a way, and I think there are better ways, to be honest, than engagement surveys. Having done a lot of work and being brought in by organisations where it might not be entire organisation wide, but it's certainly within particular departments where, in response to high turnover or in response to perhaps a number of complaints or grievances in relation to bullying or poor management or whatever it might be, or even just employees being identified as underperformers, going in and actually speaking to people and pressure testing what it is that they are thinking and what they are feeling is a far more effective way than an anonymous survey where you are forcing people to give scores. And even if you set up infrastructures that require them to provide a comment if they score too high or score too low, it's not the same as looking someone in the eye and asking them to explain and talk truthfully about what they are feeling. Now, they might not do that to someone internally within the organisation, but they are probably going to be quite likely to do that to someone who they don't see as having any vested interest. So the legitimacy of these processes I think is questionable. I think it becomes even more questionable when an organisation says, well, managers, 10% of your bonus or X% of your bonus is going to be linked to your engagement scores being above a particular level. It is rife, and I see this happen in so many organisations. Indeed, one example where a senior executive was openly bribing members of that executive's team through bottles of champagne the week before engagement surveys under the auspices of saying, just want to say thank you and think you're all doing a great job. But that was called out and immediately seen for what it was. But those are the kinds of behaviours that you're going to get when you start to link that question to bonuses.
Yeah, well, that completely undermines the actual aim of it. That becomes a very cynical thing to do then, as far as management is concerned, isn't it? So how common would that be then, that those bonuses are linked to the outcome of these surveys?
Yeah, it is becoming increasingly common, because what organisations are saying is, we've been doing these engagement surveys for a while, but what are we actually doing in a proactive way to ensure that we are seen to be responsive? And we don't want to be seen to be responsive after the event. We want to create an infrastructure whereby we're proactively building people's engagement. And we want managers to be exhibiting the right behaviours to have people better engaged, create the right culture, etc. And the thinking is that the best way that you can do that is if you incentivate them financially. But of course, that is not an easy thing for a manager to do. If you go to any manager in any organisation and say, I'm just going to spend 1 minute now, the brief for you in the next 12 months is you need to improve the culture within your team, that manager is not going to have the foggiest idea as to how they go about doing that. These are nebulous terms, these are nebulous concepts. So so I understand the quandary for organisations in terms of being seen to be taking their culture seriously, but I do question whether linkage to bonuses is the right way to do it.